Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this very special Institute of Hospitality CPD webinar this afternoon. My name is Sam Corstock and I'm the Head of Professional Development here at the Institute. And I'm your host for this afternoon. And I'm joined by an expert panel who you can see on the screen, and we'll introduce those to you in a moment. But before we start, I just wanted to run through some housekeeping items with you, just so we help the webinar run smoothly as possible today. So if you do have any questions for our panel, we encourage you to ask as many as you like. Please do that using the facility on your screen. There's a question box on your screen, and we'll get through as many of those as we can towards the end of this session this afternoon. We aim to finish within the hour, and remember you can use this towards your CPD hours, and you need to record this within your members dashboard area within the Institute's website. Today's webinar will also be filmed and placed on our on-demand channel, and that will be done within the next 24 hours, so you can watch this back as and when you need it. So without further ado, let's get going with today's webinar. And to start us off, I'd like to introduce our panel to talk about the artistry of ambience. So I'm just going to go around the screen and ask each of our panel members to say a little bit about themselves, who they are, and why they said I'm in to the Institute of Hospitality. So in no particular order, I'll just go around as it is on my screen. So Chris, would you like to go first?
Certainly. My name's Chris Gunton from CGA Integration. We're a specialist AV contractor installer in the hospitality sector. We work with lighting control and sound systems within installed venues to help with the ambience and help with trading conditions. I'm a member of the IoH because it's a wonderful opportunity for us to network and meet colleagues from across the industry, whether they be suppliers, hoteliers, restaurateurs, and they help us understand the needs of the industry, what the trends are in the industry, and how we can best serve the industry.
Excellent, brilliant. And if we ever forget what you actually do, it says it in big blue letters above your head. So that's very handy. Thanks, Chris. Laurie, can I come to you next?
Hi, so I'm Laurie Edwards. I'm Creative Director and owner of Chic Weddings and Events. We specialise in floristry and venue styling. We work across Kent, London and South East, providing floristry for not only weddings, but also things like Christmas decorations for hotels and restaurants, weekly flower contracts, and also corporate kind of hospitality, event florals. So basically all of those lovely finishing touches for any wedding or event. I'm actually really new to the Institute. I got asked to do my first kind of roundtable discussion only a couple of months ago, and it's already opened up a great opportunity, as Chris said, for networking, and also to understand what the needs of the individual hotels and restaurants in what they're actually looking for. So it's a great research opportunity for us, as well as an amazing network opportunity.
Brilliant, fantastic. Thank you, Laurie. And Paul, if we could come to you next, please.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Christodoulou. I represent Bolsius, which is a 152-year-old family-run candle manufacturer, which is based in the Netherlands. I represent them here in the UK and in Ireland, and we have been making candles for churches, for hospitality, for retail, and my reason for being here is to share with you how important candlelight can be. I've been a member of IoH myself now for almost 5 years, and after a little bit of pushing, I was able to secure our business to join as a bronze partner. So I've been shouting I'm in for quite some time, and have been successful. And yeah, I find the Institute a fantastic way of understanding what the hospitality market is needing in all different areas. A fantastic way of networking as a supplier into the industry. Yeah, and getting to know people and making more friends as well. So yeah.
Excellent, brilliant. Thank you, Paul. That's lovely. So let's crack on today with today's subject, which is all about the artistry of ambience. So whether you're designing a physical space, creating an event, or even creating a digital experience, the atmosphere you build can profoundly influence how people feel, think, and connect. In today's session, we'll explore how ambience combines elements like lighting, sound, texture, and space to invoke emotion and evaluate experiences. You'll gain insights and discover the techniques that transform ordinary settings into extraordinary environments. So, our first talking point that we'd like to cover today is, what is ambience? Laurie, would you like to tackle that one first?
Absolutely. So for me, ambience is all about creating a welcoming environment to your guests or your visitors. So it's thinking about everything that goes into your physical space. So what do you want to create? What feeling do you want to create? Do you want to create something that's warm and cozy or relaxing, or a beautiful kind of dinner party feel to it? So it's all about what is the space that you're kind of wanting to decorate, I suppose. It's not all about how something looks. I'm sure Chris will come in with things like the sound and light, and again, I'm sure Paul would say things like candles as well. So it's all about creating that kind of beautiful, welcoming kind of space, whatever the event, whatever the kind of setting, really.
And there's a bit of a trend, isn't there, Laurie, to go a little bit more back to that ambient feel. And I think we've had a long period of minimalistic approaches in hospitality, and I think some of that is starting to come back, isn't it? We're seeing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about invoking the senses. So that I feel is really kind of important. And yes, although the minimal kind of spaces are beautiful, I think if you're actually trying to create a particular, whether it be a season or you just need that little bit more in your space sometimes.
Definitely. Okay, so if we dive a little bit deeper into that and look at some of the key elements of ambience, you've got things like lighting, sound, color, texture, materials, and the actual design of the space that we're working in. Let's start with the lighting then. So, Paul, I guess this is where the beautiful candles that can change a space, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've always said as a company, like the warm flicker of candlelight to entice drinkers and diners alike. It plays an important role in setting and maintaining the tone of an establishment. And we've also, over the last couple of years, deep dived further to actually talk with consumers in respect of that. And they see candlelight as one source of lighting, as a warm and inviting light that welcomes them. So that's where we see the position of candlelight in terms of lighting and what it can bring as one option.
And I guess that also comes into smells as well, doesn't it? I guess do your candles and candles can, I guess, give a certain smell which evokes some of that memories and warmth as well, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, for us specifically in hospitality, we focus more on light. than we do on fragrance, and there are many different ways to fragrance. But what we find is that that flicker of candle, that flickering flame, just brings that warmth and inviting feeling into the psyche. Whereas also within hospitality, yes, there are fragrance candles, which we can touch upon in a little while, but there are so many fragrances that can enhance different moods and different feelings. But for us, it's more to do with that gentle flicker and that warm glow that a candle can.
I say, if I can just jump in, some of the time, a candle is one tool, and your installed lighting is on the ceiling and around the walls, and to add the dynamic of putting a light on a table local to people that flickers and changes the focus of a room can really change the ambience. So if you've turned your function space from a meeting during the day to the dinner dance in the evening, to have the lighting gone from bright and business-like to little pools of light which are actually animated with the candle flicker can really make a huge difference to the fixed space without changing any other dynamics. But that ambience piece is about engaging all those senses. So even in the business meeting on the dinner dance, Laurie might put wonderful flowers that give a fragrance that complement things, and it's all of those dynamics that play into making that ambience of the room.
Along with sound as well, Chris. That's obviously your bag as well, isn't it? So that you could all look beautiful, but then you might have some rock music banging in the background, which doesn't quite fit the environment. So
yeah, there are a couple of different strands to the sound. One is getting the right content. Your retirement they often don't want to listen to heavy metal, or vice versa. You need to get the content right, and then you need to get it delivered right. Historically, to a rock concert, you'd have lots of speakers at the front, and the first 3 rows would be deaf, and the people at the back will struggle to hear. Whereas in hospitality, we now have to think about distributing the sound and the lighting and everything evenly through the room, so everybody has a consistent experience. And this is where things like ceiling speakers work really well. One of the analogies we often give people is you give the same quality food to everyone. Everyone should be hearing the same quality of sound and have the same quality of experience. So he's trying to ensure that whatever sound equipment you have is delivering the right content in the right way to everybody who's listening.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I'd never thought about it that way. You know, the quality of the food matching the quality of the sound. Everybody should have the same experience. And I guess that also, Laurie, comes with things like the color palette and the texture and materials as well that we're using to dress that space.
Absolutely, and I think the importance of a table centre, for example. So what are you actually almost dressing your tables for? So if it was something that was very an award ceremony, for example, you want something very low. You don't want anything that's going to block eye lines, so that you can't see a stage, for example. So it's really important that you look at what that table setting is, and colour is really important to that. That we often get asked to link in with logos and brands, for example. So the kinds of florals that you choose, how they can actually match in with a particular menu or a corporate logo, and also the finishing touches on the table as well. So Paul's already mentioned about the importance of the candlelight on the table, but also think about different linens, rather than just going for a plain white tablecloth or a plain napkin. You can actually bring colour and texture by changing your linens that are on the table. Something very simple like a napkin change can actually completely change your table scoping. So it is something that we do look at throughout all of the events that we actually plan for. It's a minor kind of change, but can make all of the difference.
And things like chair covers as well. You can get, especially in banqueting rooms, something from a corporate blue metal chair through to something that looks quite luxurious just for a chair covering is a good trick, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You're quite right, Sam. And I think going back maybe even 5-6 years, it was all about chair covers. You know, everyone had a chair cover and a kind of a sash or a bow or something around the centre of their chairs, whether it was kind of a hotel environment or a wedding environment. You do need to also think about, I've mentioned it before, about what your event is actually all about. So if you've got something that's very unwedding-y, for example, or party orientated, it may actually not be the right kind of setting to put a chair cover and sash in. So it's almost thinking about how could you change a chair, for example. So loads of different chairs on the market that are available to hire that you could actually bring in, and again, that would completely transform your setting. So yeah, I think that the two definitely go hand in hand for sure.
Excellent. So that leads quite nicely on to the psychology of ambience, really, and how that evokes emotion responses to it, evokes memories. It creates a sense of comfort, inspiration, and how that also then, from a business point of view, creates business, it creates sales, it creates productivity. I guess, Paul, when we're talking about candlelight in that environment, you know, the psychology of candles is huge, isn't it, in what you do?
Yeah, I think just to give you from our perspective, in the UK, we practically eat candles. At home, we have scented candles. We have in some homes there are 2 or 3 scented candles in different parts of the home. We use them a lot, and I think what we found is when we went into lockdown, we had no choice but to spend the time at home, and the usage of candles at that point actually increased. From a retail perspective, people were buying more because they wanted to create that safe, cozy, warm feeling in their own home, especially with what was going on outside. And what we've found is, since we've come back out to play again, and speaking with consumers, that's continued. They see a candle as something that brings safety, brings coziness and comfort. And then that's why we're trying to say, bringing candlelight into your ambience will actually trigger the psyche of the consumer to say, this is something that I feel comfortable with, this is something I feel safe with. And we've found from speaking with consumers, they were more likely to stay longer and maybe even spend more money because they feel comfortable and feel safe because of that link of the candle that they have at home now present within the ambience in hospitality.
And in a market where we're all looking for the competitive edge, something like a candle might just actually do it, mightn't it?
It will, and I think, and I don't want to come over as just a man with stats, but it's quite fascinating that in the United Kingdom, for every 10 restaurants, only 2 of them actually has candles today. So it's not something that's everywhere. It is unique right now in comparison with mainland Europe, where it's for every 10, 8 has a candle on the table. So there is having a candle on the table, although traditional, is actually quite different right now.
And Chris, when we're talking about the psychology of ambience, that music as well as the light and the environment, but music also has a emotional response for people, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. What your hearing is one of your primary fight or flight senses, and whilst you're in any environment, you're always subconsciously listening to what's going on, and the footsteps behind you in the dark alley will always trigger a response. So sometimes you can be sat in the most beautiful restaurant with all the loveliest decor and the greatest food, and you'd be sitting there going, something doesn't feel right. And you've just got to have got the wrong content or be playing the music in the wrong way, and it can put people on edge. And like Paul says, changing these little factors can make people dwell time much longer. And potentially in with Laurie's events, you know, there is an emotional connection to the event that makes them remember a particular track or a bit of music from the wedding event. If they hear it somewhere else, triggers memories. So memory is a key emotion with a lot of sound and a lot of environments.
Really interesting, which leads nicely onto our next talking point, which is around the practical applications of ambience. And when you're talking about there about the consumer, our guests, our customers, behavior when they get into various different environments, I guess the ambience that you've created, the environment you've created, changes their behavior, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think some of the time we deal with quite different environments. Paul's referenced restaurants, which is not the only place using candle. And Laurie has this wonderful advantage of coming into a space and dressing it and making something completely new. Whereas a lot of the time we do fixed installations where a restaurant will stay in one format, or a function room will have to accommodate lots of different things. So as an operator, you have to think, you know, are you a fixed format? Are you a space where people come in and change the ambience significantly? And what tools you then need, whether you need sound control, light and level controls, or even, you know, access facilities so that the events companies can come in and dress and they've got enough power and facilities to change the ambience of that space. So from an operator's point of view, you need to think about how you might want to use the ambience, what occasions might need to change the ambience. And as Paul says, yeah, the sitting dining or that evening event with a flickering candle is unique. We need to dim the lights around that, deliver the sound around that to complete all those elements. Or if, as I say, Laurie's been in, the whole room may look completely different to how it did the day before because it's been changed.
And Laurie, that's leads me into talking about event planning. So how, from a practical point of view, when we're talking about practical application of ambience, how far in advance are you working on projects? How much lead-in time do you need when you're looking at dressing an environment? And is there an element of seasonality of what things that you can get hold of at different times of the year? Just give us a bit of an insight into how the ambience of when you're creating an event works.
Yeah, absolutely. There is short lead times and there's long lead times. The average, if you're talking about a private event, so something like a wedding reception, for example, we are now booking in as People's Florist up to 2006. So, you know, sorry, 2026. So you've got such a huge
Something had gone wrong in my diary.
Time travel back. So, you know, you've got a huge lead time with something like that. Then, for example, sometimes florals very much seen are the end element. So they may have got all of their lighting, their food, they've thought about absolutely everything for that event, and then they say, oh, hold on a minute, we've actually got nothing to go into the centre of the table apart from that silver candelabra that's kicking around in the basement of a hotel somewhere. So very often it is that kind of last minute, certainly on the corporate side. I think whatever the time scale, a level of planning is always really, really necessary. So for somebody like myself to come in to actually look at the size of the table, how much working space have you got? Is there anything in the room that actually you could dress? Is there, if you're in somewhere that's got beautiful fireplaces, for example, you know, could you do a lovely focal point that could be used as a backdrop for photographs? If you're just purely concentrating on a table, what height is the table centre, working space, colours, all of that needs to go into the planning side of it. And yes, seasons do play a really important part. So floristry is very, very seasonal. So there are certain flowers and foliages that are available at certain times of the year. Also, from a budget point of view, to be looking at the seasonality of flowers, you know, that kind of helps with budgets, of which plays a huge role in any kind of event or wedding. So I think there is a real element of planning that really needs to go into it, and the longer the time frame you have, not always the more beneficial, because you do tend to change your mind if you've got a really long lead time into something. Anything that's sort of a year and onwards from that year, you do tend to change your mind so much. So it's not always a good thing of having a huge amounts of time. Certainly for those event coordinators and things in hotels where you could actually be changing your mind so many times. But I do think it's important that you need to understand what you're trying to achieve in terms of your floristry, and also just in the general room as well. You know, a lot of our clients think, oh, we need to dress everything, you know, I don't like that picture over there, let's put a backdrop up there. Well, that actually may not aesthetically be keeping with the kind of feel of the room. If you're in a beautiful castle, for example, and you don't like that picture on the wall, actually by sticking a piece of cloth up there, everyone's going to be thinking, what's behind there? Is there something there that I shouldn't be seeing? So, you know, it is important to look at your space and to actually think what really does need dressing. Your eye always goes to something that's being dressed, so actually make that a focal point or make that a gorgeous table centre. Don't necessarily worry about what's around your room.
And I guess all of that planning really, you know, you really rely on both relationship you have with your client, but also the relationship you're building with the venues that you're working in, doesn't it? Absolutely.
You know, relationships with our venues is huge to the success of our business. You know, working with our venues, understanding what our venues want to kind of achieve as much as the kind of client. It's all about relationships, and it's all about working together. And certainly in some of the venues that we work at, timing constraints on actually setting up an event can be huge. Certainly if it's a public venue. So if it's something like a gorgeous castle or an art gallery or anything like that, you might literally only have something like 45 minutes to turn a room around. So you have to planning and communication between the other kind of businesses that are kind of adding something into that space. It's all about all knowing what everybody's doing at whatever time to kind of turn a space around very, very quickly in some cases.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really good. Thanks, Laurie. So let's move on to some of the tools and techniques to create that ambience. So we've got some modern tools. So I'll come to you first, Chris, and then I'm going to come to Paul to talk about some of the traditional methods. But what are some of the modern tools that you use in terms of lighting, sound, projection, mapping? I've got here. What does all of that mean?
A lot of the time, if you're in a new build space, it's often very hard for the operator to understand how it's going to trade, because you can build the grandest of room and then the client will come in with an events company, just completely redress it, make it look different to how you ever imagined. But for a hotel event space, you have to build in as many tools, as much flexibility as you can to change the color of the light. And that's not just red, green and blue, but there's a bright white, a cool white you use for a business meeting where you can see the page clearly, and a softer yellower light that's a warmer light, which you might use in an evening in conjunction with candles once you've dimmed it down, which really make a difference on mood. The difference between sitting in daylight at home or sitting, you know, with the side light on in an evening is a very different mood between daylight. So to give yourself some color temperatures in the light in the room gives you some flexibility. To be able to bring in some color can sometimes work to soften the mood of a room, but equally you get the times where if you could put the corporate color down one wall for the entrance, it gives people some tie-in with the brands. But again, it's about as much control. Sometimes people have coffers in the ceiling to be able to control them separately from the wall lights. Just putting as much flexibility as you can for those. In a restaurant type environment, often those elements are designed in, but it's about putting a programmer on it or a scheduler on it, so the lunchtime lighting level is always consistent, the afternoon lighting levels are consistent, the evening lighting levels are consistent, and they adjust during the day to match your trading trends. And that scheduler piece can be used with volume levels as well as lighting levels. You touched on a video mapping. That's often more used on externals. Everybody's seen the celebrations on Buckingham Palace where they project on the front of that to change the building. It is used occasionally internally, and some of the nicer venues are now using video walls inside spaces. So not only does that give you a change of colour, but it gives you some animation. But it's very few venues at the moment. There's a couple of hotels in London now doing it, where you have that level of technology installed. Often it'll be hired in and brought in for maybe a high-tech event or event that needs particular video content. But again, once you've got that, and I always refer to the TV at the end of the bar in your local pub, you have to think about the content. So if it's just showing EastEnders with the sound turned off, it's really not adding anything to your environment. But if you can find the right content, and we've explored some screens with venues that are actually underground, putting daylight images in there, putting a video camera on the top of the building that's showing a view over a park, so people are getting some animation and some natural light, so they don't feel like they're sitting downstairs and underground, which can make a space more used to a venue during those dark days where they want to put people downstairs where they need the capacity.
That's really interesting, Chris, and we're going to come on to a little bit more about the future of Ambience in a while. So hold some of those ideas as well for a little bit. But Paul, if I could come to you, the more traditional methods of creating ambience, and obviously candles is you couldn't get much more traditional way of creating an ambience than a candle. But what other sort of like natural materials or things that people can bring in that space?
Well, yeah, we've been using candles, go back all the way back when they were taking the fat that was drained from cooking, and which was called tallow, and then they would create candles from that so that they would be able to light where they were living. So a candle is, you can't get much more traditional. It goes all the way back, and we try to create a range of candles that fits every type and style. So from your traditional pillars and table candles for a romantic setting to something a little bit more colorful, a little bit more trendy, we try to create using what is just the flickering flame as at its core, to try and create the right ambience using a candle for all types and styles. But what we try to do as a company is we try to be as good to the planet as possible. We recently became B Corp, which is quite a difficult thing to achieve, especially when you're making something that is burned. What we needed to do was look at, how can we be more eco-friendly? We source our materials locally. We use recycled materials that can then, when you finish using them, be recycled afterward. So there's nothing going into landfill. We eliminated the use of palm oil from our candle production, and we also eliminated animal fats, which is a very strong ingredient, especially for cheaper candles. And that's a key factor if you're wanting to have vegans, for example. Vegan people enjoying a meal don't want an animal fat candle burning at the center of the table. So we're always looking for different ways to be kind to the planet. A lot of our candles are also, in fact, the majority of our candles are now made using plant-based wax. So rather than drilling out of the ground, because a lot of candles are made using a byproduct of paraffin, we are growing our raw material as well. So it's taking a traditional product and bringing it up to date and trying to utilize what the planet provides us, so we're not damaging or adding to the problems that we have right now.
Yeah, no, it's really important. Sustainability is, high on everyone's agenda, and let's carry on that theme, Laurie. I know we talked about, floristry in terms of seasonality and, sustainability there, but what other things do you do in your business to make it more sustainable?
Absolutely. So sustainability is really important to us here. So we're almost going back to the roots of traditional floristry. So when I learned floristry 20 years ago now plus, I was taught very traditional methods of making things. So recently, and I would say sort of anywhere from about 15 years now, Oasis, which is obviously a plastic-based product, has historically been used in arrangements, creating all of these beautiful floristry arrangements. When I started to was taught floristry, if you like, when I was at college, we were taught very traditional methods. So you had a vessel, you used chicken wire, you put your water in your vessel, and then you literally fed all of your flower stems through the kind of chicken wire scenario. That is very much something that is now coming back, and most florists are actually trying to go back to those traditional methods so that we're not adding to the landfill. Also composting, it's absolutely huge. You supply all of these gorgeous florals for weddings, events, weekly flower contracts in hotels. What actually happens to those flowers at the end of their life? And yes, a lot still sadly end up in a landfill scenario, where actually they can be recycled, they can be used to make compost, and there are some amazing young companies that have literally bounced onto the scene over the last year that will actually come around and collect from events, collect from your kind of own premises, so that they do, all of your florals actually do go back into a composting kind of environment. So that's actually something that we use in our own kind of business setting here. Also, so the materials that you use, I touched upon things like Oasis, but single-use plastic in floristry is also huge. How things are kind of wrapped and presented. Nothing quite like lots of lovely, beautiful packaging in something. Actually, you can start to use recycled packaging now. Containers, actually not using single-use plastic containers, but lovely glassware. And so they're all things that we do consider when we're actually planning either a simple table centre or a weekly flower install into a hotel. How can you create that in a sustainable kind of way? And I think your kind of guests are also keen to know what that sustainable journey is. So to actually tell your guests what you're actually doing, I think is really important as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And lots of the research shows around, when you're talking about sustainability, it's the consumer, it's just for the sake of it, is always looking for the sustainability element now on everything that they're doing. So, whether it's a B Corp organization like yours, Paul, or whether you're using sustainability practices like what you're doing, Laurie, is so important, isn't it, for A, their competitive edge, but B, it's just the right thing to do. And that's really, really good. So,
and also actually just touching on things like carbon footprint as well. For us as florists, it's actually looking at buying not only seasonal flowers, but actually flowers that are homegrown here.
Yeah.
So flowers that are actually produced in our home counties. That's so important. The same with anything like candles. You know, we're not using cheap China imports. I said it. You know, we're actually using things that may cost you a little bit more, but the carbon footprint kind of emissions are so much lower, and I think that's really, really important as well.
Yeah,
completely agree. Completely agree.
And especially when you're in the venues where are quite keen to say that their farm to fork mileage is low, and yet all the flowers that you see are shipped in from, you know, every corner of the globe. You know, it just doesn't quite you know, greenwashing, I think they call that, don't they? So, you know, the whole story has to meet in every element of the hotel or the environment or the business. So let's talk. So just to remind everybody, please send in some questions. This is another reminder to send in some questions, please. Whilst we're waiting for those to come in, let's talk about some of the challenges and common mistakes people make or businesses make in this environment when trying to create an ambience that suits their business and their brand. Chris, I'm sure you've consulted in lots of venues that do this terribly wrong, and then you come in and make it amazing. But give some examples of the things that you've seen that where you know instantly you'll walk into a venue and go, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong.
One of the challenges we find in things like sound is subjective. The music I listen to might be very different to the music you listen to. But what you have to do is think about what the brand is. Laurie touched on this earlier with the events. You have to make sure that the music you're playing, the way in which it's delivered in the venue, for instance, is in line with the marketing before people get to an event or into a venue, so that it continues that brand message. You know, there's some brands that advertise with classical music, and then you walk into the venue and it's rock music, and it doesn't quite gel and correlate. But also, it's playing the music, not only the right type of music, the right level for the type of venue. We did a restaurant that was based around 80s rock, and they played it really loud. And yet, a lot of the fine dining and Michelin stars restaurants, the music is very subtle. It's very much a background element of it. And it's placing it right within all the sensory elements, that the content and the level is correct. We're lucky enough to work with a restaurant chain called Dishoom, and they almost regard the speakers as part of the decor. They put twice as many speakers in their venue per square foot than any other restaurant chain we know, because as you go in, you're never more than a metre or two from a speaker. And so you don't notice how close you are to a speaker, because it's all surrounding, like the decor, like the lighting, like the ambience. It's all surrounding and it's there. The minute you're through the door, you're immersed in that environment. And that's, I think that's the essence of the ambience, is all those elements tied together and surround you. And it's almost escapology. No, escapism, that's the word I was looking for, where you've come from the street and you've gone into the event or the venue, and they've taken you somewhere else. They've stimulated all your senses and taken you somewhere where you can just forget about the everyday and enjoy that experience.
Amazing. Yeah, that's so important. And Paul, any examples, inconsistencies that you've come across?
Actually, we do have one, which is we all assume that candles, in terms of ambience, is only whilst there's no sun outside. So autumn, winter, and then after that, the candles go away and don't come back out till September, October. That's actually wrong. The candles is an all year round. And what we have to do is to share that and say, you know, people still want that warm, inviting feeling any time of the year, and not just necessarily when it's dark. Weddings use, I'm sure Laurie will nod in agreement, weddings take place heavily in the spring and the summer. Candles is used at that point. And also, since COVID, there are more outdoor areas now where people want to be outdoors, sit down and have a drink or eat, have a meal. There's much more of that now, and there are outdoor candles. So as the evening is starting, there is that still element of a naked flame. So for us, that's the inconsistency, is the automatic assumption that as the sun is coming back up again or staying out longer, we don't need the candle anymore.
Yeah, a really good point, Paul, and really really good idea about using candles outside during the summer. We just as a personal thing in our house, when we're at al fresco dining, always have a citronella candle burning. Not only does it look nice, but it also keeps away all the midges, which is you know, a double bonus in the summer, isn't it? So that you know, it has a double
Yeah,
benefit, doesn't it?
absolutely. We supply outdoor candles with citronella added as a fragrance, a very gentle citronella, because it can be very overpowering. It's a heavy lemony scent, hence the name. But you are actually creating a win-win. You're creating a nice ambience, and you're also keeping the bugs away. But in the UK, we don't really have that many bugs. Further north into Scotland, they have the midges. It becomes more prevalent. In Europe, they have the mosquitoes. We're not as strong with that, but equally, having that citronella candle or a candle keeps the bugs, the flies, away from while you're eating or having a drink.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my wife would disagree. Any sort of thing that flies near her is awful. So no matter where she's in the world, she wouldn't want to be sitting anywhere near a fly. Okay, so we've got about 15 more minutes left. So just look at what's going to happen in the future. So of Ambience, we've looked at the very traditional, some of the things that we're doing now. Well, what's coming down the pipeline? Let's start with you, Chris, and then go to Laura and finish with Paul.
I'd say it's very hard to predict. There's lots of refinement. I'd love to tell you AI was taking over, but we're dealing with human emotion, and human emotions aren't changing significantly. We want to be taken into environments where we feel warm and safe, as Paul was alluding with the candle. You know, something that feels familiar or something that feels different, that takes us somewhere special. There is lots of technology out there. I'm not sure technology is always the answer. A video wall or an image on a screen could be quite flat compared to a nice floral or a draped room that has a bit more depth and a bit more texture to it. So I'm not sure where I could point you as to the future of ambience. I think people refine ambience and level out. You know, there's lots of work being done. It's not represented here today so much with scent and things around scent. There's lots of people developing their own scents in spaces and signature scents. There are restaurant brands who are now delivering their own playlists. So once they've developed the music in the restaurant, you can actually take that home, and now you can order their food at home. You can take part of that ambience home with you. So there's lots of extensions to the ambience theme. One thing we haven't particularly touched on here, which I think is quite key in hospitality, is actually those personal interactions. And whilst they're not part of your surrounding, it's how the staff of the hotel or the venue or the wedding or the event deal with you can change the way in which you look at an ambience and how comfortable you feel. I think that is something we shouldn't overlook, is how key those people are, because ambience is all the elements. It's not, we can't just sort the ambience by putting some flowers, couple of candles, and making the music right. It is 100 other little things as well that all add together, and once they're working together, create an ambience. And often you only know what you're missing when you've put it all there and you go, something doesn't feel right. Something on an emotional level, you're going, it's not right. The sound's right, or the colour's right, or the smell's wrong. Something's wrong. So I think the future is just refining that and learning how to listen to ourselves, our own emotions, to say this space feels right, or this space is portraying what we want to put forward with our brand, with our event, with our policy.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Laurie, what's the future trends looking like in the event space?
So I think actually I agree 100% with what Chris has just said. I think texture and kind of colour and is just so important, and I can see that coming in even more. You know, changing of touched on it before, things like your table linens and your napkins, whether it's a kind of a hotel setting, a restaurant setting, a wedding section setting, you know, to me that is kind of where a lot of focus is on at the moment. It's about table scoping. It's not just about a table centre being plonked in the middle of a round table. Are round tables fit for purpose? Should there be long tables? Should you change the kind of chair rather than just popping something like a chair cover on it? I think it's a lot more about what you're actually trying to create. It's not just about putting a table centre on the table anymore. So I do think that us as florists and venue stylists, we need to understand what a client or a hotel or a restaurant is actually trying to create and replicate that in what we do for events that happen within that space. So I do think that's kind of key. Textures is definitely key. Seasonality, sustainability, all of those things that we've touched on are real buzzwords that are being given to me in briefs by my clients. You know, things like how can we have a sustainable table centre that is seasonally correct? How can we put fruits in with that? So it's all about doing things that are slightly different, as well as thinking out of that box a little bit more as well. So I think from an event point of view, yeah, certainly it's just working on really understanding what your client actually wants to achieve at the end.
Excellent, good stuff. Thanks, Laurie. And then Paul, what's the future of candles?
It's interesting you say we started earlier on, and we've been using them for a very, very long time. And yeah, what is the future? Well, we're still using them. They're still the same. There's only so much you can do with a candle in terms of design and look, because at the end of the day, you still have the same naked flame. But for us, what we're seeing is hospitality is most certainly evolving, and we're seeing different ways where people come together, whether it's being in market halls and going to street food venues, or whether they're going to a pub and enjoying a meal and a drink. We're seeing lots of different things evolving within the industry, and all we're trying to do is continue to say that candle can bring those people in, because I agree completely with what Chris has said, also Laurie, because you've got to create that right feeling, and if you have all the relevant elements that does that, our element is purely to try and bring that welcoming part into place as well. And we think that the future is having a candle on the table, because it does bring people in.
Excellent, brilliant, good stuff. So I think that brings us nicely to the end of today's discussion. So big thank you to Chris, Laurie and Paul. If any of our viewers, listeners that are viewing today want to get hold of you and continue the conversation, I take it you're all on social media platforms like LinkedIn and the like. Yes,
Yep.
Yes, excellent, good. So please reach out to the panel in all of those places. It's been a really good discussion. I hope you've enjoyed it as well as us putting this on for you today. And thank you to the panel for all their time and patience in getting the webinar live and broadcasted today. We really appreciate the time that you've given to us freely. For those of you that are members, please remember to add this webinar to your CPD portal, and you can use an hour towards your 30 hours for the year. And And just to remind you of our next CPD webinar, which is on the 11th of February at 11 AM, which is an in-depth overview of the events industry. So a little bit more about what we were talking about today with Laurie, but we're going to have a deep dive into the events sector. So that's it. Have a lovely rest of the afternoon. Go and light a candle. Go and put some flowers in a vase and put some nice music on and have a relaxing evening. There we go. Thank you, and we'll see you all again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye bye.